What is going on, everybody, and welcome back to TCG Madness. My name is Philip, and today I have another altered TCG deck build. We are finishing up the Axiom faction hero, and today I have a sub-hash brass bug deck build for you guys. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Now, if you do enjoy this, please do me the big favor right now. Hit that like button. If you're new, consider hitting that subscribe button. Don't forget to also hit that notification bell so you guys never miss when I drop a video. Also, if you guys want to comment, maybe you guys can comment down below. Maybe you guys think I missed something, because I know we all have a little bit of a different opinion, which I absolutely love, that I get difference of opinions from you guys, and maybe I think I have a little too much permanence, a little too many spells, or maybe not enough characters, or maybe too many characters. Comment all that down below. Also, too, if you guys maybe want to comment on cards that you guys maybe would sideboard if you guys were going up against another different type of faction, or if you guys were taking this deck to a tournament, maybe how you guys can sideboard to make it a little more competitive, or maybe cards that I missed. All that I would really welcome to hear from you guys down below in the comment section. Now, like all the other videos, we're going to go through the hero itself, then we're going to go through, of course, the meat and potatoes, if you guys want to pause the video and see the deck real quick before I talk about it. Of course, then we're going to go into the stats, and then I'm going to go ahead and show you guys 3 unique examples that I think would go really well, or go good with this deck, be paired up really well with this deck. Of course, though, I don't know what your unique situation looks like. That's why I give what I think is what I call 3 examples, which I'm very fortunate that Alter TCG at least has that for us, so we can kind of look at good examples, because again, everybody's unique situation is going to be different, so just always keep that in mind. Now, with that being said, let's go ahead and take a look at the hero. This is the final hero that we're going to look at for Axiom before we jump into Muna next, so I'm really excited about that. I will say too, for this hero, I actually had a good time building this hero. I do enjoy playing with this hero. I think out of all the Axiom, I think this is my go-to hero for Axiom, just because it's pretty much, it functions really, really well. And of course, you guys can read, and I'll talk about it here in a minute, but it's just so easy to play with this hero. It's pretty much a deck build that pretty much wants to do 3 things, right? You want to be able to draw cards, you want to be able to resupply yourself, and then you also want to be able to make sure you guys make a bunch of brass bug tokens. Now, the hero itself, pretty easy. It's Subhash Marmo. It's Axiom hero, of course. 2 cards for reserve, 2 cards for landmarks. At noon, you may pay 1 and put a card from your hand into your reserve to create a brass bug 2/2/2 robot token in target expedition. I love that ability, y'all. It's pretty sweet and simple, right? Short, sweet, and to the point. Pay 1, put a card in your hand to the reserve, create a token. Pretty simple. Like, that pretty much says exactly what this deck wants to build. Now, the way I created this deck is that I wanted to put my own little bit of flavor and a little bit of spice into this deck and do something a little bit differently. So I actually went out of my way to find out-of-faction heroes that actually go, I think personally, go really well with this here, especially making brass bug tokens. The first card, now we're going to go ahead and get to the meat and potatoes of the deck. The first card that I went out of my way immediately put into this deck was the out-of-faction Jeanne d'Arc. It's a 5/5, 3 across the board. When I leave the expedition zone, create a brass bug 2/2/2 robot token each of your expeditions. That card right there is amazing. I love this card. I think this is definitely a must-have. I put 3 copies of this in the deck. This is pretty much your big, you're setting up your big win condition, right? Playing her, got 3 across the board. Maybe you have 6 mana, pay 1, put another card from your hand into your reserve, create another token. She leaves, create 2 more tokens. This card is really, really good. It's really powerful, and it can definitely set up for some big board gameplays, especially because you want to create tokens and go wide. The thing with this deck is, again, you want to do basically 3 things, right? You want to basically be able to draw cards, you want to basically be able to resupply, and you always want to make sure you have at least 1 mana open so you can utilize your hero's ability. If you can't do that, create brass bug tokens and go wide with it. The big weakness of this deck is, of course, something like Kraken's Wrath hitting you. That's pretty much your big weakness, right? Because you can go wide with it pretty easily, especially in Axiom, but of course you run the risk of then just getting Kraken's Wrath. So try to make sure you win before that actually happens, if possible, or at least make sure you're well ahead of the game. So even if it does happen to you, it doesn't really matter that much. Next up we have in the deck is an Axiom Salvager. It's a 1/2 for 1 across the board. It has resupply when you play it out of your reserve. Put the top card of your deck in reserve. Like this card, I like resupply, underrated ability. I like making sure that I have cards or options in my reserve at all times. So if I only have 1 card in my reserve, playing an Axiom Salvager and basically resupply, especially if I've already played with my hero. This is a great turn 1, by the way, playing this and then playing your using your hero's ability, because then you're getting the Axiom Salvager and brass bug on your turn 1, which is pretty good as well. But just a couple of copies of those ones. Next up, we have 3 copies of a 2/2 Keylon Elemental. It's a 1/3/3. That basically says when you play out of your hand, put a card from your hand in your reserve. I like this again because it's pseudo resupply. Again, making sure you always have options in your reserve is very key for this deck. Next up, we have one copy of a regular O-Gun. He's a 2/2 for a 2/1/1. Whether you play him, doesn't matter where you play him, out of your hand or your reserve. Robots you control gain 1 boost. Your tokens will get that 1 boost. Just one copy of this one I think is warranted because I did go with the 2 copies of the rare. Now you guys can comment down below if you guys agree or disagree with this one. I do think I like this copy as well because it's pretty much if you can't utilize your hero's ability, well, let's go ahead and utilize O-Gun's ability. He's a 2/2 for a 2/1/1. If you play him out of your hand or your reserve, you may pay 2 to create a Brass Bug 2/2 robot token in target expedition. Then robots you control gain a boost. Now, again, I like that because, again, you're going to gain a boost. If you pay 2, you get to actually put it in target expedition, so whether your hero or your companion side, pretty good there. And again, this is also another great turn 1 play, playing him, utilizing then your hero's ability, and you're going to get the boost from him as well. Pretty good. That's why I think this one is warranted for 2 copies. But again, you guys can let me know down below. We also have 2 copies of the rare Ada Lovelace, 2/2 for a 1/2/1. When you play this card out of your reserve, you may put a card from your hand into the reserve to draw a card. Again, I think this deck, you're going to be playing a lot of cards from your hand into your reserve, so you're doing a lot of hand manipulation. The one thing that I did realize with this deck that I kind of ran across was I eventually run out of cards. So when you run out of cards, I kind of had to manipulate the deck a little bit to be like, okay, how can I get these cards back into my hand? I need to make sure I have some more cards that allow me to draw stuff. This, I think, does solve it. When I put her in the deck, and I was able to get her a couple of times, when I was testing this out, I did feel like I was more fluid with basically having at least a couple of cards in hand at all time to always make sure that I utilize my hero's ability, because you will come across the point of having that 1 mana open. You always want to make sure that you're utilizing your hero's ability. If you're not utilizing your hero's ability, make sure you have the permanents to go wide with it. I'll talk a little bit more about that later in the video. Didn't mean to do that. Next up, we have 3 copies of an out of faction rare. Here's another card that I thought was pretty good for this deck, but you guys can let me know. It's a Monolith Runescribe 2/2 for a 1/2/2. When you play it out of your hand, if you control a token, resupply for the top card of your deck in reserve. Again, I always like to make sure that I'm constantly utilizing my reserve and to make sure that I always have cards in my reserve, and basically what this means is I always have options in my reserve. I can constantly play cards because, again, if you don't have cards in hand, then you have no choice to go to your reserve. That's pretty much just what you're going to do. To make sure I always have copies of something in my reserve. And again, when you're constantly going through your deck, you're going to basically find the answer that you are looking for. So hopefully you can always utilize your reserve. When you're also playing with this deck, it really is key to make sure you play at least 1 card out of your reserve constantly. If that means you have to play 2 and hold on to all the cards in your hand, do that. It works really well. But again, am I saying this is like a very competitive deck? No, there probably are some better cards. You guys can comment and let me know down below. Again, I wanted to put my little bit of flavor, my little bit of spice into this deck. I don't want everybody's decks to look, the same. It's one of the beauties, I think, of altered TCGs that we have that capability. So I want to make sure that I never lose that in my deck builds. Next up, we have Foundry Armorer. I think this is pretty much a staple for all Axiom. It's a 3/3 for a 2/2/2. When you play it out of your reserve, create a Brass Bug robot token in target expedition. Again, if you can constantly hit on her, go into your reserve, or play your hero's ability to take her and put her right to the reserve, you're going to get this ability immediately, which is really good. Mix that up with some O-Guns, and man, you can really go wide and beef up your tokens as well. Next up, we also have Dr. Frankenstein. This is a pretty unique card here. It's a 4/3 for a 3/3/3. And when you play it out of your reserve, you may activate the abilities of target permanent you control. Now, again, I put 2 copies of this one. I do think 2 copies is fine, but I also think you can also maybe go with the rare version of this as well, because I think that's also pretty good. But I do like the ability. Again, you may activate the abilities of target permanent you control. And again, we'll get to those permanents here in just a little bit. Another out of faction rare. This is where, again, I put like in my little flavor. Again, this deck may not be for everybody. There may be some cards where you're like, no, I would definitely put this in there. You guys can comment down below. It's Amelie Asgarthian Outcast. It's a 5/5, 5 across the board. When you play it out of your hand or your reserve, you may discard a card from your reserve to draw a card. Again, big body 5/5. You're going to constantly have cards. Now, there are some moments where you do actually have like 3 or 4 cards in your reserve, and you're like, or maybe like 3 cards in your reserve, like, I'm gonna lose one. What's one way that I can make sure before my turn ends, I can play something that's gonna get rid of this so I don't and get some kind of added bonus? This card does come in handy. It's also just good because you've got 2 cards in reserve, and one of them you don't need. Play this guy, draw some more cards. Again, get cards that you need to help you win the game, get the permanents you need, get the spells you need, that kind of stuff. And again, I had a fun time playing this deck. It's actually a really fun deck. And this is also to another one where I don't think it's needed, but I put it in here anyways. It's a 7/7 Ganesha. He's a 5 across the board. When for each permanent you control, you may activate its abilities. Again, you have a couple of permanents that have these pretty much. Activating these abilities a couple of times, either with this or Dr. Frankenstein, is pretty good. That's the characters of the deck. We have 25 total. Again, you guys can comment down below if you guys agree or disagree with anything I put in this deck. I also have 2 rares of Hooked. It's a 2/2. Target character switches Expedition. Pretty cool. And you get to draw a card. So that's really, really good. So you get to switch your characters. So again, if you have maybe like a Brass Bug or a Ganesha over here, you want to swap them to make sure you're advancing. Playing Hooked can definitely get you to where you need to go. And also, you get to draw a card, which is why I put the rare version of this. Again, drawing cards, pretty powerful. We also have Mechanical Training. That's a 1/2. Activate the abilities of target permanent you control. Again, I have 3 copies of this. You can also maybe make an argument to put the rare version of this one as well, because I think it has, you get to do target of up to 2 permanents you control, which is pretty good. I just went with the standard Mechanical Training for a 1/2. I think it's pretty good. For removal, we only have the Keylon Burst 3/3. You guys know this card pretty well. Choose one, send to reserve target character with a hand cost of 4 or less. Discard target permanent with a hand cost of 4 or less. And then for the permanents, this is where we get into a little bit of a tricky situation. The first permanent is a Brass Bug Hub. This is the rare version, 2/2. I gain 3 Keylon counters. So again, this is the ability you would be copying if you played like Mechanical Training. And it says, at noon, you may pay 1 to spend 1 of my Keylon counters to create a Brass Bug robot token in target expedition. Pretty good. We also have the regular version of Brass Bug Hub for a 3/3, and pretty much the same exact ability. It's just cost a little bit more. So you have one that's a little more cost efficient for a 2/2, and you also have the one that's a 3/3. Then the big win con right here, this is the permanent you really want to see as early as possible. If you don't get one of these, you definitely want to get this one. It's the Brass Bug Hive. It's a 5/5. Create a Brass Bug 2/2 robot token in target expedition. At noon, create a Brass Bug robot token in target expedition. This is the ability you'll be copying. So if you have, again, the Mechanical Training, if you have, like, let's say 6 mana, play this, create 1. Use Mechanical Training, create another one. You know, if you have 7 mana, use your hero's ability, create another one. You can pretty much see how you can go wide with this. Again, Kraken's Wrath is going to be the only thing that stops you. That is the deck itself. Let me know what you guys think down below in the comments section. Again, I wanted to put my kind of flavor. This is just my spin on this deck. I don't think this is the most optimal deck, because again, out of like, I think I played like 10 or 12 games. I think I won like 4 or 5 of them. So not bad, but not good either. Not optimized. For the stats, 24, 15, of course. You guys can see the hand and reserve cost. Pretty good hand and reserve cost, I think. I think we mixed up a little bit better here than we did in the previous deck. We have 1/2s, heavies on the 2s, but pretty much your 1s and 3s are pretty good. A couple of 4s and 5s, the 1/7 being Ganesha. For your reserve cost, heavies on the 2s, secondary on the 3s and the 5s. No 1s, no 4s, no 6s, and that 1/7 being Ganesha. For the attributes, pretty much even keel for the attributes. I like this too. 53, 61, 59. Pretty much standard. That is as good as it gets as far as across the board. When you mix in all these robot tokens and if you beef them all up, it's pretty good. 8 spells, 6 permanents, 25 characters. Haven't scanned any of these cards because I am very, very lazy. You guys can see it's not legal except for the parts that are cards owned. So you guys can see this deck is a deck that you can play and take to your tournaments. No uniques, don't know your unique situation is. Of course, that's what we're going to get into next. I'm now going to show you guys 3 examples of unique cards that I do think would work pretty well. But again, they're just examples, something else to just kind of talk about a little bit further with this deck build. So let's go ahead and jump to that now. For the first unique here, I have a Foundry Armor. Here's my first example. It's a 4/2 for a 1/2/1. It has, when you play it at your hand or your reserve, create a Brass Bug robot token, which is really good, of course. Pretty much a staple for the Foundry Armor. But the other ability here says when you play a permanent, you may discard a card from your reserve. If you do, you may return a card from your reserve to your hand. Now, I've mentioned we have a lot of cards that basically take cards out of your reserve or out of your hand into your reserve, top of your deck to your reserve. In other words, you're only going to get one shot with those because they're going to gain fleeting once they leave your reserve and get into the field. Once you do that, you're basically going to lose that card. So this is actually a really unique way of making sure you're getting those cards back from the discard pile back into your hand. And I really do like that a lot, basically giving you a second opportunity to get those cards. So I like this a lot. I think this would be a really good unique in this deck. Again, I think it's a pretty cool example. I would love to hear from some of you guys what your unique situation kind of is. If you guys have any of these unique cards that you guys think would go good with it, or what kind of unique card you guys think you would like to see, have seen maybe, let me know. Next example I have here is a Dr. Frankenstein unique. It's a 6/4 for a 2/2/4. If I had this card, I would absolutely remove Ganesha and go with this Dr. Frankenstein for a 6/4 body. When you play out of your hand or your reserve, you may discard a card from your reserve. If you do draw a card, I also gain 2 boosts, so that's really good. So we're going to get boost across the board. And then when you play out your reserve, you may activate the abilities of up to 2 target permanents you control. If you control 2 Brass Bug Hives or Brass Bug Hubs or something like that, you're going to create a ton of Brass Bug tokens on top of having this big body out here and be able to also draw a card. Again, pretty good. I think drawing cards is very much needed for this deck because you're constantly dumping cards out of your hand or even out of your deck into your reserve. So drawing cards also basically allows you to go through your deck a lot faster, which then you can get the cards you need. If you get the cards you need before your opponent, chances are you're going to win. That's one thing I've definitely found so far. And then last but not least, we have a unique O-Gun 2/2 for 2/0/0. You may sacrifice a character or permanent if you do draw a card. Again, drawing cards. And then when you create a token, robots you control other than me gain a boost. So I like this a lot. Do wish it was like a 2/1 instead of a 2/2 because you don't get anything other than bonuses right here other than in the grass field. Kind of sucks, but again, I like right here, there's the drawing cards. It's just an example, guys. I really just love the sacrificing character permanent to draw a card. If I had this, I might get rid of like my Hooked, or I might get rid of one of the Out-of-Faction rares, the Amelie or whatever his name is, Amelie or whatever, Amelie. I might get rid of him. I might get rid of Ganesha. Just, again, more cards to draw stuff into, I think is definitely warranted for this deck if I had a card like that. That's going to do it for me. That's going to do it for this video. Hope you guys have enjoyed the Axiom run through for these heroes. Next up we'll be going over is Muna. I'll have those videos ready for you guys next week. For the rest of this week, I probably am going to do another buy, sell, or hold video. We're going to do a couple of booster box and some Pokemon ETBs opening. Hope you guys are excited about that. If you are, hit that like button. If you're new, consider hitting that subscribe button. Hope you guys have enjoyed all of this. As always, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. I'll see you guys next time.